Welcome to the 500th episode of the Afford Anything podcast. Please welcome to the stage Paula Pant and her guest Barrett.
Thank you all for coming. Episode 500, here we are. I want to give a shout out. I want to start by giving a shout out to a couple that came here. They're here from the UK on their honeymoon. On their honeymoon. Can you lovebirds stand up? Let's give them a hand. And I also want to give a shout out. Some of Brad's high school friends are here.
Yeah, we got Mark and Adam in the back there. Thanks for coming out, guys. So yeah, I'm from Long Island, so it's great that they could make it out here. So thanks.
It's hard.
This is like my existential worry is, can I talk into the microphone properly?
Well, how many episodes has ChooseFI done?
I think we're up to about 640.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
And so the fact that there's still this doubt of, can I talk into a microphone?
Yeah. I think that says more about me and my internal state than I would care to admit.
I mean, there's some imposter syndrome to unpack there.
Yeah. It never goes away. If you want to talk to those guys in the back, they can give you a whole lot of stories.
And so what we're going to do is officially, formally, I'm interviewing you, Brad. And we've both been covering personal finance and the world of financial independence for many, many years now. For me, it's been 8 years. For you, it's been seven?
Yeah.
Okay. What has changed? And more critically, what has not changed?
Paula,
I should
Paula puts me on the spot right away. There's no softball?
I know. I should have told you ahead of time. I should have prepped you for that ahead of time.
Here's the hardest question you could possibly get. Okay. I've been in the financial independence world I found Mr. Money Mustache going way back to 2013. At that point, it was largely about extreme frugality. And I think there has been, always will be a place in our community for frugality. And so I'm going to cheat and this is going to be one answer for everything here. Because I think we may have overplayed going away from frugality over the last couple of years. How many times have you guys heard us say Die with Zero, right? You're probably sick of me saying, oh, I read the book Die with Zero, right? But that was a sea change for me. It really was. And I think it made me realize that there are seasons of life. You don't want to wish away years. And I think that was what we saw early on in the FI journey. For a lot of us, it was a race to a number on a screen. And that is not a life well lived. I think a lot of us have realized that, right? Money, very simply, does not make you happy. It adds to a wonderful life, right? So let's be clear. This is really important. But money in and of itself, you are not going to hit your financial independence number and all of a sudden there's unicorns and rainbows. It doesn't work that way. You have to work at this. You have to work at this constantly. And I think you're going to realize that what you know about yourself is going to change all the time. You're going to have to iterate and try new things. And, you always hear the silly, I don't mean silly in the sense that this is a bad idea, but I'm going to sail around the world, right? I'm going to hit my number and I'm going to sail around the world. And meanwhile, they've never been on a freaking sailboat. Come on, guys. You have to figure out, what does life actually look like? And that is a constant iterative process. For a very long time, it was just, let's be as frugal as we can be. I think to our great credit, I don't usually pat myself on the back, but something we've done really well, right? Both, thanks, Paul, is change the narrative. And we've made this something that was very extreme. So even predating Pete was Jacob from Early Retirement Extreme talking about spending under $10,000 a year on his entire life. I mean, do you think that's a narrative that is going to shape the world? No, of course it's not, right? Like it's not possible because people hear that and they think that sounds freaking miserable. Why would I do that? And then even Pete, and Pete lives a wonderful life. Let's be clear.
Pete is Mr. Money Mustache.
Thank you. Even Pete, I think to a lot of people, they hear, oh, his life cost whatever it was back in the day, $28,000 or $35,000. How can you live a life like that? And I think Pete could explain himself very, very clearly and would have no problem with that. But to normal people, that sounds crazy. And I think something that we have done, both of our podcasts have done exceptionally well, is change that narrative that financial independence is truly for everyone. And it is essentially a universal good. And I kind of bristle when I hear, all these, I'm not one of these anti-media people, but like, the media, like, oh, those fire people, they tried fire and it was terrible and they came back. Like, come on. Like, I would struggle to find one human being who pursued financial independence, however they defined it, and found that their life was worse off afterwards. It just simply doesn't happen. In my opinion, it is not possible because your life is better when you have more financial freedom. Hard stop, end of story. These narratives choose to focus on the RE because, I mean, it's like somewhat sexy, right? Like this, oh, financial independence, retire early. Like there's some like panache to it. But they only focus then on the RE. And then it's, oh, these lazy people doing nothing and blah, 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 blah. And what's going to happen to society if everyone pursues RE? Well, I mean, that's ridiculous in and of itself, right? But like, I think what we have done is try to focus on financial independence. So this is a very long, rambling answer to, I think the fundamentals have changed. And I think how we view this entire community has changed. And this audience is a perfect example of, would you all be out here? Would you have listened to potentially over 1,000 episodes of our two combined podcasts if it was, hey, live on $8,000 a year, right? Like there's no world where that would happen. Right, in New York, right? Right. That's 1 month. So, so it's silly. But when you change the narrative to being something that is about how you define it, wherever you live, however it works in your life, let's be clear, you have to make changes. You have to make changes and take action to make your life better. Again, hard stop, end of story. But you get to define it. Not somebody else, not even Pete with I always thought it was ridiculous, the riding bicycles. Like, that just didn't work in my life. And the funny thing is we actually just rode bicycles with Pete in Arizona. And it was awesome. So I guess, joke's on me, obviously, right? But that just didn't work for my life. So if that was a tenet of financial or FIRE, I would have said, I'm kind of peace out. That's all she wrote. But again, when you define it, how it works for you, okay, it's a whole different ballgame.
You talk about defining financial independence in a way that actually fits you, in a way that is true to your life. But a person's life is dynamic. And so how do you balance continually updating your relationship with your pursuit of financial independence? On one hand, you want to commit to a particular path, right? You want to have a strategy and you don't want to let minor aches and pains cause you to deviate from that strategy. But at the same time, you also need to be dynamic. So how do you balance that?
For me, it's understanding that there are seasons of life. Mm-hmm. I think it's understanding that you have to give yourself some grace, ultimately. Like, this is how I see it. So life is dynamic. Mm-hmm. Life is lumpy. Things come up, right? We understand that. You're going to have random expenses that you didn't anticipate. And it's just part of life. When you start beating yourself up because you're not hitting some elusive savings rate, like, it's almost our keeping up with the Joneses, right? Is like, oh, my savings rate is 56.25%. But like last year it was 54.76. You know, like give me like nobody cares, right? Like, and you can easily devolve, right, into, oh, my savings rate is better than yours, which is just my Mercedes is better than yours in another part of the world. So you can't play the external game, is how I look at it. Like, I realize that this being life, frankly, is it's an internal game. A, you have to give yourself some grace. B, you have to understand that things constantly evolve, constantly. And going back to what I said before about like, life is not unicorns and rainbows when you hit a number on a screen. It just simply isn't. And you also have to understand that like what you want out of life constantly evolves. And that's okay. You don't set a plan when you're 26 and life looks exactly the same at 56. It just doesn't work that way. We should all understand that from our lived experiences, right? Like, think about just my life alone. And obviously, I have this bizarre podcast thing that I could have never envisioned in a million years. But 10 years ago to the day, I was sitting in an office in Richmond, Virginia, doing corporate state tax returns. Can you imagine a worse job than doing corporate state tax returns over and over? It's Groundhog Day every single year, just over and over for 15 years. It was a nice career. And, you know, it paid the bills, yada, yada, yada. But to imagine in 2014 that my life would be where it is now is laughable. Our lives are all different. Think about where you were 10 years ago. Could you have envisioned where you are today? I suspect some of you could have. But many of us, life looks dramatically different. And that is okay. That is the same thing on your path to financial independence. It is part of life. There's not something special and different about this. It's part of life. And, you know, again, going back to the die with zero is also understanding there truly are seasons of life. And depending on where you are in your life, for me, I have two almost teenage girls. So I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And this is a rapidly closing season of life. What I do now, it's almost like a memento mori type thing, is remember there's an end. So literally every single day, when I turn my computer on, I open up what Microsoft like Notepad or whatever, just like a little notes thing, and I have a countdown. So this is to August 15th, 2026, and August 15th, 2030, which is when my older daughter goes to college and when my younger daughter goes to college. And this is a very visceral thing that I could automate it, obviously. I'm sure all of you are yelling at me for, come on, like you got to be doing this automated. But I literally, every single day, change that number. And for my older daughter, it is somewhere in the vicinity of 870 days, plus or minus. And when that clock ticks down to zero, it's over. Not that our lives are over and our relationship's over, but her sitting on that couch every single night, in my case, her wanting to talk to me about roller coasters, which is her like favorite thing. And she's a certified roller coaster enthusiast. So this is like a real thing. When I want to go to sleep at 9:15, because that's, I'm old and that's kind of my thing. Like, she wants to talk about roller coasters. The honest truth is, on August 16th, 2026, I will give anything to have her sitting on that couch wanting to talk about roller coasters. And she's not going to be there. And what that does is it helps inform how I live today. Because when she wants to talk, and it's not always about roller coasters, right? Sometimes it's about other things in life. But when she wants to talk, there are sometimes where I'm like, okay, August 16th, 2026. It's coming. So that actually helps inform my decisions. And so, yeah, again, another very, very long answer, Paula, but it's just understanding that life changes and that is okay. But you have to also understand that there is a finite nature of some things, and we need to try to really grab hold of it.
What relationship does money have with, what you've talked about, sitting on your couch, talking to your daughter about roller coasters? I can visualize it, right? It's I don't even know what your daughter looks like, and nor do I know what your couch looks like,
It's a very nice couch.
But I have an imagination of what I think it looks like. Actually, honestly, in my imagination, I've just imagined my parents' couch. To a person who's unacquainted with a financial independence podcast, they might wonder, wait a minute, how did we get from a conversation about money to a conversation about memento mori? Yeah. How do we trace money through this very critical reevaluation of what you're talking about, our priorities, our deepest values? They say time is money, money is time. Both are just limited resources. That's really what this is about, is the allocation of incredibly limited resources.
I think this is something that, again, we've all realized with the kind of the evolution of FI, which is that money allows you to spend on things that you value. And again, this goes back to it being a very personal thing, where I think, and I always hate to paint with a broad brush in a negative sense of regular people, non-FI people, because it sounds ridiculous and
default world people,
a little elitist. But I think there are normal status games that go along with middle class or upper middle class life, and we can all fill in the blanks for whatever that looks like. The cars, the houses, the private schools. And that's not to say that any of those things are inherently bad. It is to say that I think most people do it on autopilot. And they don't ever think about what they actually value. That is the issue, as far as I see it. That you need to get off autopilot and say, what do I want my life to look like? What do I actually value? Because like Paula said, time is money. So in essence, you have given up some of your life energy to earn that money. And to spend it on something that you don't value just because you think it's going to impress somebody else, seems like the height of folly to me. So there clearly is a time to spend now. And I think this is where our community went wrong in the early days. Again, it was all about frugality and just racing to a number, but giving up years of our lives, in essence. And you understand really quickly that money allows you to do really cool things sometimes. That's fun, and we shouldn't feel bad about it when you are living intentionally. If you're just sleepwalking, you need to wake up. But when you're living an intentional life and you're spending on things you want to spend on, well, that's wonderful. And if it's any of the, even I just painted this broad brush of cars and houses and whatever. If you're a car person and that is something that really lights you up, spend freely. That's perfectly fine. Not that you need my permission, obviously, but spend. That's wonderful. Do your thing. But for me, it's about experiences, and it's about spending time with people that you want to spend time with. I didn't think twice about coming up here to New York for less than a 48-hour trip, because this is amazing. And this is life-giving to be here in front of 60 plus people and to hang out with Paula. And this was a no-brainer, right? I didn't think about this for more than 1 second. It was just an auto yes.
Yeah.
And, if I did, which I have not, if I tallied up what this cost, it's not an insubstantial amount of money to travel up and hotels and yada, yada. But who cares? Who cares? And I think about that when it comes to trips, especially in this season, again, with the roller coaster. And I do have a younger daughter who's wonderful, and I don't talk about her nearly enough. She's amazing. But the roller coaster, there's something about roller coaster.
Let's talk about your favorite daughter.
Sorry, Molly. There is something about this roller coaster thing that it's just fun to talk about. Yeah, but I mean, so the three of us, so we'll bring Molly into the fold here. So we're going to Europe this summer. And it's this amazing dad and daughters trip that we're going to remember forever. We're going to see Taylor Swift in London, which is amazing. And audible gasps.
Audible gasps in the room.
And then, so there's
some Swifties in this room.
Yeah, lots of Swifties. Hell yeah. We'll have to do top 5 songs later or something. And then it winds up that their second favorite singer is this girl, Olivia Rodrigo. I don't know if, okay. So no audible gasp, but we have lots of affirmation. So she, just by sheer happenstance, is playing in Barcelona 3 days before. So we're like, oh, yes, please. That'll work, right? So we're flying into Barcelona. We're going to see Olivia. Then we're flying over to London, going to see Taylor. I'm like, that is something that if we had not pursued financial independence would be impossible. Simply impossible. And that is a trip that obviously by any definition is going to cost a lot of money. But who cares? I didn't think about it twice. I think that's the answer to the question is it gives you options and it gives you the ability to spend on what you value.
Mm. You know, in the early days when a lot of people were really hyper focused on frugality, there was this sense in the community of we're living for tomorrow. We are deferring all joy today for the sake of a better tomorrow. And like really to the extreme. We saw counterexamples in the rest of the world of people who spent everything today and had zero savings for tomorrow. And, you know, we had a community where, I'll just speak for myself, there was definitely a period of time where I wasn't just planning for the future, I was living in it and living for it. Do you think, in terms of the journey that this whole community kind of collectively has taken out of hyper-frugality and into a more balanced approach, do you think the fact that we had an 11-year bull market influenced that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly didn't hurt. Right? Let's be clear. But I mean, there have been a lot of ups and downs, even amidst like
roller coasters. Even
roller coasters. Oh, she's good. She's good. The running theme of the evening. I mean, how many articles did you see in 2020 though? Is the FIRE movement dead? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
It's easy to say that the community has been successful because of the stock market. And I mean, we're not going to lie. Obviously, it's helped, right? But how I look at financial independence is basically if you can build a life where you have a significant savings rate, however you define that. And again, we're not getting into the tit for tat, you know, mine's 52 point, whatever. But, you know, like, and I'll bring it back to my daughters, which seems to be what I bring everything back to at this point. But like, I tell them in essence, if you can more or less find FI, and yeah, they have a little unfair advantage, obviously, but if you can find FI before you've made any mistakes or, you know, gotten into debt in any way, and you save 50% of your income, you can gleefully spend every other dollar, and you are basically, barring a zombie apocalypse, going to be financially successful. It's almost impossible to screw up your life if you have a 50% savings rate. And then we can dial it back from there. Like, by no means is this the you have to have a 50% savings rate to succeed community. I mean, it just wouldn't be possible. And it's not possible we're in a high cost of living area right now in New York. Like, is a 50% savings rate possible for most people? I don't think so. It wouldn't have been for me. And yet, here you are, right? And it is a very personal thing. It's easy to always kind of wish away. Like, it's almost like this is for somebody else. There's always an excuse. There's always an excuse why that works for somebody else, but it doesn't work for you. It just, in life, I feel like it's always some elusive they, right? And in this case, the they is, they succeeded because the stock market's been on fire for 11 years. Well, no, I think they succeeded, they being us, they succeeded because they reoriented their lives around what they value. and they understand that saving money is really, really critical. And that means both a combination of frugality and earning more. And I think this is something, going back to your very first question, Paula, it's something that we missed in the community at the beginning to our great detriment of, right, earning more money. And you're
more,
huge about this.
Yeah. Well, I'm huge about it because it's oftentimes when I'm speaking, I'm giving advice to the younger version of myself. Like, I'm just saying all of the things that I regret that nobody told me when I was 22. I'm speaking to the 22-year-old version of myself. In my 20s, I was like just reading everything I could about managing money. And I kept reading the idea that, if you earn more, you're just going to spend more. So don't even bother focusing on the earning side of the equation. Just focus on save. In retrospect, that's a very reductive and dismissive attitude towards earning more. Like, if you earn more, it doesn't necessarily follow that you'll spend more. If you earn more, then you could spend less. You could spend right? There is no if then that in which the then is necessarily that you would spend at the level of your income. To prescribe that as the only path, or to assume that that's the only path, is misguided. But yet that seemed to be the dominant narrative in the early days. But again, I do wonder, like, we talk about the early days as 2012, 2013. I mean, we had just come out of the Great Recession at that point. We had just seen housing values crash and the stock market crash. Like, we had just gone through the greatest economic upset since the Great Depression. And I think that had to have some type of an impact on collective psychology, and similarly, I mentioned an 11-year bull run, but even when that 11 years got interrupted, the bull market ended in 2020, in March of 2020, for a month, and then it went right back to bull again, So we're now in these like amazing economic headwinds, and the party just doesn't stop. Like, NVIDIA just keeps going. A year ago, I was like, it's overblown. It's still going.
Yeah. The ship has sailed a year ago. Right?
Yeah. And so now I think that what I hear so often is a fear of heights, right? I hear people say, the market is at all-time highs. I don't want to get in. But people have been saying that now at this point for years, because we've just been at new all-time highs. And I see people, and everyone here is nodding their heads. This is resonating. So what do we do now in an environment where we're just in consistent all-time highs?
Just like always with financial advice is, this is not advice for anybody in particular, obviously. Learning the simple path to wealth was one of those lightning bolt moments in my life where, I don't know about you guys, but it was investing always seemed impossible. It always seemed like something that you needed some expert, or you were missing something, or you needed to study for years and years and years. And it's one of the most important aspects of your financial life, certainly, if not your life. But yet it is this odd system where the simplest version is, if you were a betting person, it is essentially the highest likelihood of success. And that is really a bizarre aspect of life. And I don't think we talk about that enough, of just like how odd it is that turning off your brain, in essence, and just saying, I'm going to invest in low-cost ETFs and index funds, in my estimation, gives you the highest likelihood of success over a 30 to 50 year period, which is what we're looking at. So net of fees, net of everything. That's really wonderful to essentially not need to know anything. That was like a sea change moment for me, a lightning bolt moment of, oh, I can actually sleep at night. And I'm a CPA. Like, in theory, I should have had some knowledge. And like, it always seemed like a black box to me. Buying VTI, Vanguard's total ETF, is, essentially I'm buying a little piece of 3,000 companies. and the ingenuity and hard work of 100 million plus American workers and people all around the world. Like, that feels pretty good. I'll take being essentially the owner of a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece of 3,000 plus companies and 100 plus million American workers. That'll work for me. You could have said that at any point over this last 11 years. And where would you be if you sat on the sidelines? You would be a lot less well off. Certainly, all of us would be. I think it's easy to come up with a narrative of why we know better. Or you listen to somebody on CNBC who had some like macro take. Like, anytime you hear the word macro, run as far and as fast as you possibly can. These people are complete morons and know nothing. We cannot know this. I look at the world as like a series almost of like bets. So what gives me the highest likelihood of success? The highest likelihood of success for me is not trying to time the market on both sides, the in and the out. I can't do it. You all can't do it. The macro guy can't do it. There's no world. So for me, it's just every 2 weeks or whenever money starts rolling in, I continue to purchase my total stock market funds. That helps me sleep at night because I'm playing a 50-year game. I'm not playing a 5-year game. I'm not playing Morningstar gave this a 5-star rating last quarter game, right? Like, we are not playing short-term games. We're playing long-term games. And I think that is something that sets our community apart.
The risk with long-term games, at least psychologically, is oftentimes good things happen slowly over time. Bad things happen in an instant. So good things compound and grow, and over the span of a dozen years, there's a steady upward trajectory. But then when there's a negative event, you look at the big shocks that have happened. Pearl Harbor, 9/11, the pandemic, like, these are things that no one could have predicted. Quoting heavily from Morgan Housel here. These are things that nobody could have predicted, and they happened in an instant, and they shook everything up. And we see that with like very sudden market crashes as well.
I actually want to throw this back on you because I think the all-time high question is incredibly interesting. What do you think about all-time highs?
Whenever I start to feel a fear of heights come up in myself, I will go back and I will look at what happened if you put a huge lump sum of money into the market at the end of 2007 or at the end of 2006. If you'd put a giant lump sum in the market right before the Great Recession. You think of recessions in terms of there's duration, there's severity, and there's frequency. In terms of severity, hopefully the Great Recession will be the most severe recession that we will ever experience. Certainly over the span of the last 100 years, it was, other than the Great Depression, it was the second most severe. So what would have happened if you had put in a huge lump sum of money right before such a severe recession? Well, if you'd put that in and you just left it, then today in 2024, you'd be great. You'd still be great. And so that's very much how I calm myself when I start to think of that fear of heights is, hey, even the person who invested at the peak of 2006, 2007 would still be great today.
Right. So literally worst possible timing.
Yeah, exactly.
And we can run the numbers when we get home and maybe edit it in of like, if you put in $100,000 at the worst possible time, what would it be worth today?
We'd be sitting happy today still. So I take a lot of comfort in that. Let's open it up to you all.
Hello, everyone. So we have an appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the city clerk's office to get married.
Congrats. Woo.
Congratulations.
So this is our bachelorette.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So I know we got bachelorette, honeymoon, we got everything. All this.
Wow.
We
What a night.
So I was just wondering, between, like you said, 1,000+ episodes, what was the most impactful thing that you've learned since starting the podcast? So like through your journeys, you decided to start the podcast. What really hit you sideways?
It's interesting. We just had an episode talking about getting married and safeguarding yourselves. I'll have to get the exact episode number. It might have been 480 or thereabouts, with a woman named Amy whose husband actually tragically passed away. And And it was such a poignant episode about making sure your loved ones are safeguarded. And I think a lot of us, myself very much included, say, oh, I can put beneficiaries on later, or, oh, it'll be fine if, even if I get hit by a bus, like, it's all going to go to my wife or whatever. Or, oh, I'll wait for that term life insurance, or, oh, I'll wait to get a will. My wife's a CPA. I mean, she's very capable, but as much as I'd like to believe I have everything, I's dotted, T's crossed, and she would be able to pick up and run with it, I don't know if that's actually true. So this particular episode just kind of opened my eyes to bad things can happen, and you need to safeguard your loved ones in whatever way and whatever your situation is. Like the age-old tale with our podcast is you have to take action. I think that if there's one through line of almost 650 episodes of ChooseFI, it is you have to get up off the couch and take action. And it's easy to listen to podcasts. It's easy to read books. It's all well and good if you have it, you have this knowledge, but it doesn't mean anything unless you do it. And listen, I am as much to blame as anybody on this. Like, there are times where I have the best intentions and I sometimes just don't do it. So it's overcome that inertia and just, and take action in essence. So in this particular case, but really in every case. And I think that is what separates our community, I think, from most.
Wow. I had a totally different answer.
Go for it.
Well,
let's see it.
My tongue-in-cheek answer is what I've learned is if Susie Orman ever calls you, always get on the phone with her.
You might have to tell the story real quick.
Susie Orman was on in, what was that, 2018 or 2019? That was a while back. And my very opening question was, Susie, what do you think of the FIRE movement? And she said, quote, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. And then we went from there.
Yeah, that had legs.
But the thing that I've learned as a podcaster, what I love about podcasting as a medium is that you can go long form, you can go deep. And in the age of TikTok, when everything is, 10 seconds and you're on a screen and you're scrolling and it's the age of distraction, there are a lot of people who say, like, we live in the age of TikTok, you need to be quick and you need to be snappy. And I don't believe that for a second. I believe that there is room for long form, there's room for depth, there's room for thoughtfulness, there's room for nuance. And I've stayed really committed to producing long episodes. I mean, our short episodes go for an hour. 50 to 60 minutes is like a short episode for us. In the age of short form content, I think you can really gain the most from an audiobook, from a podcast, from a book, from a long blog post or newsletter.
Yeah, and I think there's something especially intimate about podcasting also, right? Like, I know I listen to a ton of podcasts and you feel like you know those people, like they're your friends. And there's just something really unique and special about it. And you learn people's little eccentricities and ins and outs, and you learn something like Paula, as evidenced by tonight, is like just such a pro when it comes to asking questions. I mean, she is a true journalist at heart. And like, it's obvious from the first second you meet her, right? It's remarkable. And I think that's what's so special about this medium in particular.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Congratulations on your upcoming.
Huge congrats. Huge congrats.
Kumo, give him a round of applause. Without the microphone feedback.
Hi, my name is Delia. I listen to his podcast. and I have heard about you many times in the podcast. My question is about guilt, because you mentioned to give ourselves some grace. But personally, I feel guilt in the sense like I'm trying to pursue my personal finance journey because I'm from Colombia. I never heard about money, and I came here and like, oh my God, I don't have savings and stuff. So I like to travel. I like experiences. So every time like I want to travel, I do it because that's what I love the most. But then I feel guilty because I don't have the emergency fund that I think I need. So my question is, how do you, at the very beginning, when we don't even have like 100K, because after 100K, everything compounds and, it accelerates. In your journey at the beginning, how did you give yourself some grace without like taking care of your personal finance journey, but without feeling guilt for valuing and doing the things that you want to do?
I would say a few things. Number one, and I know that there are a lot of like YouTube headlines that are like, the first 100K is the hardest, and after that but really things compound with the first dollar. So you're already in the compounding cycle. You're already getting that growth. But to the guilt question, what I would recommend is have a certain amount, whether it's a specific raw dollar amount or a percentage, have a very specific amount that you're like, this is the amount that I'm dedicating towards savings. And whatever that is, do that first. And once you've done that, then in order to be firm about the amount that you're committing to savings, you then also have to be equally firm about the amount that you're committing to spending. You're like, I've committed to spending this money because only by committing to spending this amount can I be equally as committed to saving this other amount, right? So the strength in the commitment has to be equal on both sides. So if you're really strong in your commitment to save X, then you're equally as strong in your commitment to spend Y.
Yeah, I think often it's these little psychological shifts. And we have to understand we are human and we have an operating system running, and you sometimes have to trick yourself. And that's okay. That's just part of being human. So like Paula's saying, this is like, if you really parse it, it's a distinction without a difference, but it is a difference and it means everything. So in this case, it's guilt-free spending, and you have to be okay with that, right? Like, have you taken action to make your life better? Yes. You're nodding significantly. Yes. Of course you have. Doesn't that feel amazing? Yes. Of course it does. So you have to focus on the positive there about just how different your life is now. And like Paul is saying, the positive starts compounding from the very first action you take to make your life better. It just does. And compounding has a way of seeming slow at first, and then all of a sudden, boom. And you will see that on your path. But I understand at the beginning, it feels slow. It feels like you want to be there, right? Like you've made up this number 100K because you've heard it, right? And I'm not talking negatively about that, but you've heard that number as if it's some magical thing. Is it any different than 99K, 98K, 97? No. It's just some random round number. And you're beating yourself up because of some random round number. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, your life is dramatically better than before you found FI. And you should be really, really proud of yourself.
Yes, it's much better. I actually opened my BTSAX fund and like it's minimum 3K, and I was like, I don't have 3K. I will never have like a bump sum 3K. So what I did is like I started saving $100 every month, and then when I had my 3,000, like I was so happy, and I look at my app every day, and like right now I have like 5K. Yeah, and also like I wanna live my life, and tomorrow is not guaranteed. So even if I have $1 million, I don't know if I'm gonna live tomorrow, So yeah, thank you for the podcast. I'm much better today.
Nice.
My biggest concern is time constraints. So between, 2 kids, sports, just, working 40 plus hours a week. This is a little embarrassing, but I have not finished your first rental property class, and I got about halfway through it about 3 years ago, and then it just, life becomes overwhelming. Like,
Yeah, you're a turtle.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very slow turtle. So how, in the beginning, did you, before you had the fire where you had the time, how did you deal with that in the beginning?
A couple of things. One is to just give yourself grace. Like, all right, so you said, hey, this is a little embarrassing, but I haven't finished your first rental property. There's absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about with that at all. The fact that you've enrolled in a course and more broadly, the fact that you've decided that you want to learn about how to invest in rental properties and that is on your mind. It's something that you're incrementally moving towards. Like, that is something to be celebrated, rather than the script of like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I haven't finished it yet. Flip that to like, hey, I'm excited because I decided that this is something that I want to pursue. And step by step, piece by piece, I am working my way there. I'm gradually moving in that direction. There's direction and then there's acceleration, right? And I think so many people get caught up in rate of acceleration that they don't stop and think about the fact that you're in the right direction for you. And that's the single most important piece of it. So I'd give yourself a lot of grace for that. The whole reason, by the way, that we came up with the framework of a turtle, and so that just so everyone knows, so one of the things that we were dealing with in your first rental property is it's a cohort-based course. And so like in theory, you're supposed to kind of go through it as a team. And what we saw is that the people who were moving through it a little bit more slowly were often having a hard time forgiving themselves for that. And so we created this framework where in any healthy ecosystem, there are cheetahs who just like zoom through everything fast. There are wolves who run in a pack. And then there are turtles who move slowly. It's great to be a turtle. Turtles are an important part of the ecosystem. I have a pet turtle. There's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Any healthy ecosystem needs turtles. There's mentality and then there's tactics, right? The mentality, I think, is the most important part, and that's the part that I've just been addressing. Then tactically, you can fit it in the margins, but I think the tactics are less important than just like, I'm okay with the fact that I'm directionally pointed in the right place and I'm moving step by step to get there. The last thing I'll say is oftentimes the muddled middle feels like the slowest part. And when you get to the end, it actually feels fast in hindsight. So let's just say, for example, that 2 years from now, you buy your first rental property. Let's say 3 years ago is when you started thinking about it. To go from thinking about buying a rental to actually buying one in the span of 5 years is actually really quick. There are a lot of people who take 15, 20 years. Like they started thinking about it 20 years before they actually made a move, right? 5 years in the span of a human life is actually not that much time if we're lucky, And so even if it takes another 2 years, that's actually relatively quick. So zoom out and think of it like that.
So my question for the two personal finance experts here is, what money mistakes or regrets have you made in the last 12 months?
Ooh.
If any.
In the last 12 months is a good twist on that.
That's great.
Oh, wow.
It's funny. I feel like we all have our stock answers to every question. Like I was going to go on my autopilot. Actually, I've talked about my real estate adventures. Actually, my buddy who I went in on that real estate when he's literally in the back. So us two poor suckers. Oh, but last 12 months. Okay, I need to think about that.
Wow, last 12. Okay, honestly, it's like just not really paying attention. And that's a mistake. That's a chronic mistake. It's not like a single event. It's just a chronic state of not really paying that much attention. That is still ongoing. If I'm honest, I've kind of tuned out of my finances, and that's not a good thing. Like, I used to be really on top of reading my statements every single month. I used to be really on top of like, I would manually compile a net worth spreadsheet. And I have all of these apps and, programs and so like I've tried every app and I've tried every piece of software, and there are many that I use, but I also do think that there's value to periodically manually updating a spreadsheet. So I used to have this practice where I would physically log into every single account and transcribe it, process that can easily be automated, but there's a moving meditation that comes with doing it manually. But it's been years since I've done that. I stopped during the pandemic when I think all of our brains broke during the pandemic. And Humpty Dumpty is still like putting the pieces back together again, on a month by month basis. I'll like check an app and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. But like, I'm just not that in it anymore.
There are things that I know that I want to do every year, like that I espouse and I have a checklist even, but sometimes it just falls by the wayside. So I think, being less involved, maybe caring a little bit less. And it's not like because I've reached Fat Fi or something. It's more just apathy on some level. Even going through something simple, like going through my credit card bill and just looking at, are there things that have outlived their usefulness? And like, I would say we should probably all do that once a year at least, because things have a way of just appearing and not like, oh, I'm paying for Hulu and I haven't watched Hulu in 12 months, right? And not that it's big dollars, but just it's an easy change. And I think those little easy changes, they feel really good when you make those decisions. Or, even something simple like, okay, I think realistically every year we should all look at our insurance policies and get a new quote or something. And like, sometimes it feels like a real hassle to do that even once a year. The real honest answer when it comes to personal finance is you should get your silly little human brain out of it and make it so that you can't really make that many mistakes. Just get your brain out of it. Automate everything so you don't have to think about it. My perfect personal finance life is my silly little reptilian brain to not be involved at all. And therefore, I can't make mistakes. So maybe I've succeeded. I don't know. Like, yeah.
I notice myself not paying as much attention. And I've thought about like, wait a minute, why is this happening? And part of me wonders, maybe I'm making this deeper than it is. But for so long, my identity has been tied up in being this person who's like good with money. And so I think there might be a part of me that's rebelling against that a little bit. I don't want my identity to be so like I'm the money person. And I don't want this just fixed image of myself. So I don't know.
We might have to dive deep into
Yeah.
this. Come on. So 500 episodes of Afford Anything, and I don't want to be the money person. Good luck with that, Paul.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. So many books reiterate the fundamentals. You mentioned how Die with Zero uniquely affected your perspective. Are there other books that uniquely affected your perspectives?
One of the early books that informed me that a millionaire is not necessarily what a person thinks of with the popular mythology of like, what is a millionaire? Or these days that would be a billionaire, right? But there's no billionaire next door. But like The Millionaire Next Door was eye-opening in that the person next door who owns a pest control company and drives a Ford Focus could very well have a net worth of $5 million, right? So that was pretty influential for me early on. Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think, is a very good book in terms of habit development. Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, is a great one. The thesis of that book is essentially there are very, very few things in this world that actually merit giving an F, you know? And for those few things, we should really care. And for everything else, just don't worry about it.
The 4 most influential personal finance related books that I've read are Millionaire Next Door, also. There was a book way back when by an author named David Bach called Smart Couples Finish Rich. And that was very, very tactical. And I think that book helped us in our marriage very early on, more than essentially anything. So those 2, Simple Path to Wealth, clearly was a total game changer. And Die with Zero is the most recent version. And I mean, I've already talked endlessly about that, but it's just understanding seasons of life. So, I mean, I think it is, you even see an evolution in those books, right? From very tactical, Smart Couples Finish Rich, to this Simple Path to Wealth of understanding finance and understanding investing and feeling confident, the beginning stages of FI, to, all right, look, there's a life when you get to FI. And that almost by definition is going to look very different than the very early days of FI. So I've never thought about it like that until this very moment. But I mean, those would be really the 3 or 4 most influential.
Thank you. Very philosophical episode so far, so I'm afraid I'm going to be a bit prosaic. Throughout both of your podcasts, the 4% rule has been discussed ad nauseum. I was just wondering your thoughts on fixed percentage withdrawals. Because to my mind, you take your 4% every year without adjusting for inflation based on your fund balance. As long as you can deal with income volatility, you remove sequence of return risk, and you mathematically at least never run out of money. Yeah. Rather than adjusting your amount for inflation, you're adjusting it for market returns.
Yeah.
I think is the easiest way of putting it.
Well, I think the way that the original study was done is that you draw down 4% of the balance of in your account each year. So that would jive with the way that the study was done, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, maybe I'm really not mistaken, but the 4% is based on the balance at year 1, correct? And then that is adjusted in line with inflation from that point forward.
That has always been my understanding as well.
So if you were to essentially
make that adjustment
repeat that process every year.
I see what he's asking.
Yeah.
All right.
You're seeing us work through this in real time.
Yeah.
It's
so what he's saying is you've got 500,000, you draw down 20,000 in year 1.
You can't screw it up in essence. Is what the subtext of this.
If the market did very badly, you mathematically could never run out of money, but you would get to a stage where your income was so low that it was unsustainable.
Right.
However, as long as you can handle that volatility in your income, you potentially have higher gains in the future and higher income as a consequence.
Okay, yeah. So I see what you're asking. Okay, so the original study was you draw down 20,000 in year 1 and then 20,000 adjusted for inflation every subsequent year, right? And so what he's proposing is you draw down based on the account balance rather than based on the 20,000 adjusted for inflation. So it's a reset
every single year.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know if that's ever been studied. Like intuitively it makes sense, but I haven't modeled it out on a computer screen to know what that would look like. What I do know is we interviewed Bill Bengen, who is the guy who published the original study of the 4% rule. And what he found was that it was slightly over 4%. It was 4.2%. In most scenarios, you still, even with a timeline of infinity, you still had a significant chance of not running out of money.
I guess that answers why it's not been discussed. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because my reflexive answer is, I need to get big earn on this. So, I mean, I think that what you actually are getting at here is we have an incredible community. And I think this is what I actually value most about the community is like, there is no world where I have that expertise just off the top of my head. There's just simply no world. Like I could BS some answer. I'm not going to do that. But the cool part is we can model that, right? Like I can literally take this question and I'm going to email Karsten when I get back home and we're going to play around with it. And that's wonderful. I think that's the power of community. So sorry to bring it theoretical again, which is, expressly opposite of your question. But I think that is what we're doing here. We're trying to all get better. So that's something that, as you can tell from us flailing around up here trying to answer that question, we can't possibly answer that question, right? It's inconceivable that we can model it in our heads, right? That doesn't take away from the beauty of the question. It's a wonderful question. There's no world where we can answer it, but we have experts who can help us. And I think that is the power of the FI community. And that's how I've always viewed it. It's I don't need to be the world-class expert at this stuff. But what I think that I do reasonably well is I package information so that people can understand it. So I can get Karsten on, and he's going to talk in his PhD language about this. And I'm going to keep asking questions and keep clarifying and simplifying so that our entire community understands a little bit better. And we might find out that this worked wonderfully, or he might just say in his very Karsten way, this makes no sense, or, he's going to come up with something, right? But we're going to come out with an answer at the end of it. And we're all going to come out with a little more knowledge. So I think that's how I've always viewed my role in this community is I am not the world-class expert at parsing the numbers. I don't need to be because I have friends who are. And I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Sign up for the newsletter too.
So don't feel too bad about taking your first rental property and not finishing it. I finished it and then decided I didn't want to invest in real estate.
Excellent. Good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm glad I took it.
Yeah.
But my question is, you're both quite well-traveled, and my girlfriend and I are digital nomads. What are places that you've traveled to around the world that you would recommend that all of us go to?
Ooh,
that's a great
This
question.
is a great. So first of all, I want to comment on. So I want to applaud you for taking your first rental property and then realizing through that you don't want to invest in rentals. Rental property investing is not for everybody, and unfortunately, a lot of people figure that out the hard way. And the hard way is you buy a rental property, and then 6 months later or 8 months later, you're like, this sucks. This is not for me, right? And so I think one of the beauties of take a class, immerse yourself in it, and from just taking a class, really figure out, is this right for me or not? And by virtue of doing that, you spare yourself tens of thousands of dollars and huge headaches on the other side, doing it the F around and find out kind of way, right? Yeah.
Naked land speculation, also not a good idea.
So yeah, a huge applause to you for really being thoughtful about, is this for me? And taking the time to dive into that question and then coming out with an informed answer. So I think that's amazing. Now to your actual question. All right. So I just came back from Mongolia, China, and Egypt in the last, it was a whirlwind 2-week trip. But Mongolia, so I'd been to Egypt before. It was my second time there. Egypt is great. China is great. Mongolia, I really fell in love with. It's huge. And it has a total population of, I believe, around 3 million. So it's incredibly sparsely populated. So, it's nature. It's just, it's the Gobi Desert. It's these huge mountains, beautiful culture, just beautiful scenery. Mongolia is incredible. Yeah.
So yeah, I think anybody who listens to my show knows what my answer is going to be is Japan. It's my absolute favorite place I've ever visited. It's a remarkable, remarkable place. It's a remarkable culture. The people are just incredible. And it's just such an odd mix of you have Japanese game shows on the one hand, which are just these wild, things you could never imagine what these crazy people are doing, to just the majesty of history and the grand sumo competitions and just seeing Kyoto and just all the temples. It's such a fascinating place. Even though I was such a foreigner there and I stuck out like a sore thumb, but I felt at home there. And it just was a really, really special time. So, yeah, if I were to ever live anywhere else, it would unquestionably be Japan.
Yeah. I also advocate for, just go to a lot of places, but also travel slowly. At least this is my personal opinion, take it or leave it. But I'm a big proponent of what I call slow travel, where you take your time and stay there for a while. I don't count myself as having been to a country unless I've spent at least a week there. And it can be a cumulative week across, like, I went to Singapore for 3 days. And I'm going to go back again this fall because I've got a friend who just moved there. So the last time I was there for 3 days. If I'm going to go back again, I'll be there for probably like 4 days, 5 days. So, okay, cumulatively, that's a week. I'll count that. But the reason that I've implemented that rule for myself when it comes to my own personal sense of how many countries I've traveled to is I want to make sure that I'm not just like popping in, spending a day or two, leaving, and then being like, check. If I've only kind of grazed the surface of a place, then I want to give myself some type of a mental sense of that being incomplete in order to motivate myself to go back and to give it the time that it deserves. And 1 week is really even not that long, but I've set that for myself as a minimum. Yeah.
Hi guys, huge fan of both podcasts since like 2018. So it's been really fun. To piggyback on the recommendation question, we're not going to talk about travel. You both mentioned you love books, podcasts, and other content in the FIRE community. What are some of your favorites that are not based out of North America? Ooh. It could be a podcast, it could be a FIRE book, something FIRE related.
FIRE, I don't know FIRE content that's not North American based. I do know a guy who's based out of Australia who talks about dating, who's great. Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Will Hitchens on Instagram. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question. I sadly do not follow any FIRE podcasts or blogs that are not in the US. I think there's also like a FI Europe or FIRE Europe podcast that I listened to a couple times, and it's good. I think it might be maybe a similar issue from what I occasionally, and I suspect this is maybe where the question comes from also, is like get emails from people. Oh, I live in Germany. I love your podcast, but I wish you could have an episode about Germany. I'm like, yeah, I it's hard. It is genuinely. I think, in fairness, we could do a better job. But am I realistically going to have a FI Germany, a FI Malaysia episode, a FI Uganda episode? Like, I think, and I hope, those voices come from their particular countries, and I would love to see. And I think this is why, again, with our ChooseFI local groups, we've tried. I think at last count there are 30 different countries where we have local groups, and it seems to be adding slowly but surely. I hope that those people become podcasters and bloggers, like, because they're intimately familiar, obviously, with their country. They're by definition going to do a better job than I can. So, it doesn't really answer your question, unfortunately, but like,
in a way, you got the essence of where it came from, because did I turn it back on? I'm originally from Cameroon, and I have family living in France, and I tell them, they know how excited I am about FIRE, but they always tell me, oh, it only works because you're in the US now. And so I'm always trying to find a way, like, okay, actual famous podcasters, bloggers outside that I can share with them.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have those resources.
Does anyone in the audience know?
What about the couple from the UK, Donegan?
Oh, Alan and
Alan
Katie
did,
Donegan. Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't have forgotten
Also
that.
the Millionaire Revolution.
Yeah. Oh, Barney, the escape artist. Yeah. So definitely. Okay. So yeah, we completely forgot our friends in the UK. So sorry, guys. Alan and Katie are like some of my best friends in the whole world, and I literally forget them. I am going to Vegas with them next week, and I forgot them. That's incredible. So yeah, you can see how hard it is to answer questions live. Yeah. Oh no, that's gonna stay.
We're keeping that in. We're keeping that in. I also wanted to add, there's this awards thing called the Plutus Awards. The Plutus Awards honors like best personal finance content. They have a category for best Canadian personal finance content. If you just Google Plutus Awards, you can look through every year because they have the awards listed by year, and you can see not just the winners, but also all of the nominees. And so then you can check that for best Canadian personal finance blogs. So that's a good way, like anytime that someone from the audience reaches out to me and says, hey, what are the good Canadian personal finance blogs out there, or podcasts, or, content creators, I just check the Plutus Awards website.
I just want to say that I think this is better than Swifties concerts, because this is like, I mean it. I'm geeking out big time. I've been feeling like literally high for the last several weeks since I bought the tickets, because I just saw it on your Facebook, and this is like amazing. So I love you both, and you've changed my life and so many lives in an amazing way. And I do have questions, but I want to be able to tell you this. You've opened like the doors into so many books and libraries and podcasts for me to get educated on things that I would have not known. I'm an immigrant. I'm from Russia. So like my family, all they told me is just pay off your credit card every month. That's it. So question for you is, I want to know what you feeling about the real estate is. I know the market is crazy and all that stuff. I'm a cheetah, and he's a very slow turtle. So, so I want to buy all the houses today and tomorrow. And he keeps saying the market is best. So we have conversations. And we also have a 14-year-old daughter. What if there's any like classes that I could sign her up for with other like 14-year-olds? Because it's different when you like, this is amazing. Like, I'll never forget this, the energy, the everything. Like, I want her to experience that. And also for both of you, is there any like master classes or camps you are doing where people can get together and just geek out for like 3 days, like solid, in whatever way? Like FinCon, I know hasn't done it in a while, but like anything that you're planning or doing or know of.
That third question, I'll start there, because that to me is the easiest of the bunch. So there are a ton actually of these FI community gatherings, and which is wonderful. So I just got back from the Economy Conference in Cincinnati, which doesn't sound like a FI community event, but it is the largest FI event in the world. And it is, basically a 3-day weekend of geeking out. And you obviously, you learn a lot, and there are main stage speakers and breakout rooms, but it's the enjoyment for me, and I think for a lot of the attendees, is the time in between. It's the time to, because you use the word masterclass. Yeah. And I think it's important to learn. Obviously, knowledge is wonderful. Nobody's saying otherwise, but like for me, these events are about being amongst this energy and about seeing that you're not the only person pursuing FI. Because, right, in your life, there's a reasonable chance that you are the only person that you know who is pursuing FI. And you, right? Like my friends are sick of me. Right. Yeah. Her friends are sick of her. And I think a lot of us, you can ask my friends in the back, like, am I like the weird one? So I think that's normal for us. But I think when you're amidst and amongst like-minded people, it's just very energizing. So yeah, economy. So that's ME at the end, not MY. Economy conference. There's Camp FI. I think a lot of people get caught up in the camp as if you're like roughing it. It's a 3-day weekend basically at like a retreat center. So there's no roughing involved. There's an event that I'm going to this year in Bali, actually. So this is Amy Minkley has something called the 5 Freedom Retreat. And that's obviously a much more involved event to fly across the world and stay there for a week or two. But that's much more immersive. It's akin to the Chautauquas, which don't really exist anymore, unfortunately. Yeah. So, and then little events pop up, something like this. The ChooseFI local groups hopefully are having more events on a regular basis, and not just, hey, we're getting together at a brewery, but we're going to have a case study where someone is brave enough to stand up and talk about their own personal finances and get help from the group, because I think it really is about this community. And it's just really neat to see. I've seen like a little like green sprouts of these like case studies popping up in, I think at last check, it was a couple dozen of our local groups now have had people, again, being brave enough. And could you imagine standing up, for most people, standing up in front of friends and neighbors and talking about your actual numbers? Like, that's a really scary thing. But I think what we've seen is once you get that first person in your local group who's brave enough to do it, almost invariably a handful of other people jump up and say, I want to do that. Because I know in our local Richmond group, we had one and it was great. And then somebody else said, okay, 3 weeks from now, I want to do a presentation. And that couple literally realized they reached financial independence and they put in their notice at their job, like from a case study. And that was just one of those really wild things. So anyway, very long story short, there are lots of these events. There really are. And I think more and more of them are popping up. I think, and somebody could correct me, there's Fin Talks, I think is another one. Is it? There's a cruise, right? Amberly Grant has a cruise. So yeah, there's like a lot of these things that are popping up. We'll try to get like a better resource on our website.
Yeah. One thing that we at Afford Anything are planning on doing, like broadly planning on doing, but we don't have specifics yet. So we're not ready to like announce it. But we're planning on having online one-day workshops that are digital, so anybody across the nation can attend, as well as in-person events here in New York. So we don't have specifics yet, but like that's very high on our list. We also really want to do like a 1 week, in the absence of Chautauqua, because both you and I have been to many of the Chautauquas and they've been great. And in the absence of that, one of the things that we've been talking about doing as Afford Anything is planning a 1 week retreat. We've been discussing doing it in Peru. Nothing is set in stone yet. That's just behind the scenes. These are the conversations that our team is having internally to see what we can do. So yeah, the wheels are turning there.
You heard it here first. That's
yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
And again, a lot of these things, I think, and I heard somebody say this earlier. I think a lot of us, especially after the horrible COVID years, we want to get out and about and we want to meet people. We want to have more of this. And I think you're seeing these sprouts of it. So I'm going to Vegas next week with Donegans.
Alan Donegan.
Alan Donegan, sorry, Al. And we just opened this event. This was essentially a last minute plan. Where like Alan came to me and said, do you want to do something awesome? I'm like, oh, well, how do you say no to that? Right? Like, so yes. And he had this idea for, let's do a FI event in the least FI place in the world, Vegas, right? So we basically just put this together. And Alan and Katie, so this is not like, total fly by the seat of your pants thing. They have long experience with Chautauqua and such. So, but anyway, I mean, we put this together and within 10 days, we opened it up to the public. And it sold out in a day. We sold 80 tickets of this thing. And it was proof of concept. And I think we're planning on doing more of these. And we're like, oh, wouldn't Hawaii be cool? We're going to do it in Vegas again. Because that's just, okay, where are there easy places for people to get to? So very long story short, I think you're going to see a lot more of these pop up because it's super energizing.
So rental property in the world of residential real estate, there is unfortunately a huge shortage of housing. And what that means is that there is market pressure for home prices to continue to rise. And that is going to be true until more housing supply is created. And we are unfortunately a very, very long way from new housing supply, in sufficient housing supply being created. And so because of the imbalance between supply and demand, we just simply do not have enough homes to meet the demand. Because of that, that is a fundamental market pressure that's going to keep home prices rising. Now, I'll asterisk this with, obviously, every market is local. And so, what's true in broadly as a nationwide aggregate may not apply to, Youngstown, Ohio. There are going to be isolated local pockets that have unique real estate circumstances. But speaking broadly nationwide, residential home prices are likely going to continue to rise. And so I'm very bullish on investing in properties. I think that in particular, if you can invest in properties and then increase housing supply, be part of the solution. If you can buy a single family home and turn it into a duplex, you then do two things. You, number one, contribute to the solution of increasing housing supply, because now you've taken what was once one property and you've turned it into two. And you also make more money by virtue of doing that, because now you're collecting two different incomes rather than just one, right? So the style of real estate investing that earns you the most amount of money is also the thing that actually helps solve the problem. And that comes from increasing supply, either by creating new units or by increasing density, by increasing the number of bedrooms per unit, right? So if you can do either of those two things, that in particular is good for you and good for the market in general. Yeah.
Cheetah all the way.
All right, in terms of time,
what time?
we've let's make this the last question.
I got a quick one.
Yeah.
Rental properties are great, in our opinion. And then there's the market. What do you or anybody in the room have for ideas of other ways to invest money?
Oh, so many. One thing that I think we don't talk about enough is making money through the ownership of businesses. And that can either come from starting a business yourself, which is typically done by starting a side hustle and then growing it on the side until it has, enough momentum that you can quit your job and do it full time. Very much like we did, So either by starting a business or by buying a business. And I don't think that we talk about the buying a business portion of it enough. There's a lot of opportunity there, but the ownership of private businesses, whether it's one that you have created or whether it's one that you've purchased, is a huge opportunity. And in particular, purchasing businesses right now and over the span of the next decade, as there's going to be a huge number of baby boomers who are retiring. That's a trend that's already begun. And as baby boomers retire, a lot of them are small business owners who they need a successor, and their children don't necessarily want to take over the family business. I mean, logically, just because you have an HVAC company doesn't necessarily mean that your kids have a dream of running that HVAC company, right? So if you're a small business owner, your kids don't want the business, well, you have to sell it if you ever want to retire. And so there's going to be and this is already starting, a lot of small businesses that are coming on the market that are very healthy, long-term viable businesses that the owners just want to exit out of because they're 60 or they're 65 and it's time to do something different.
Yeah, it's funny. I literally just got a pitch from somebody about this. It was they use an acronym I'd never heard. So ETA, so entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I'm sure both of us get hundreds of these random people sending us emails all the time, but something about that one just really stuck out to me. So that's an episode we're going to have in the future. I think that's really, really interesting. Another person, Cody Sanchez, you've had her on, right?
She hasn't been on yet.
Oh, she hasn't been on. Okay. She's another person to follow in that sphere. I found her especially interesting. You can find her if you just Google Cody Sanchez podcast. You can listen to a number of episodes. She's been on, various podcasts.
I asked this of Joe Salsi-High a couple of years ago at the book signing, and I'm actually curious of Paula's answer first, so if you would answer second. As a board gamer...
I'm fine not answering.
This is a board game question, so nothing too hard. You're kickstarting tomorrow your dream board game you've been working on. Wow. What type of mechanics is it? What's the theme? What's it like?
Ooh, wow. Okay. A dream board game. The first thing that's popping into my head is like some combination of Clue with Chutes and Ladders. All right, if I'm just brainstorming out loud here. If I were to come up with a board game, of course it would have to have some type of money related lesson. There are 2 board games that I know of that teach about money. One was created by Robert Kiyosaki. It's Cash Flow. Yeah, the rat race one. Yeah. The other is I think it's called Franklin's Folly.
Yeah.
Franklin's Folly. So the reason that Clue comes to mind is that I like the structure of assembling a little bit of a whodunit, and I would somehow try to find a way to create like a murder mystery whodunit sort of a theme into finance concepts. I don't know exactly how that would happen. But that would be like the ultimate board game.
Who killed somebody over the will or something? Like
yeah.
That? Right?
I can see this actually turning into an escape room. You know what? This would be maybe better as an escape room than it would be as a board game. You know?
Yeah, I like that a lot. So,
and you have to solve personal finance questions to find the clues to get out of the escape room. Yeah.
The total market just went down. Total adjustable market. So we're a big board game family. Our favorite mechanism, I guess, is deck building. So Dominion is our all-time favorite. Dominion is also the game that ruined board games for us. Actually, like we wound up. So we probably played this at the beginning of the pandemic, maybe 1,000 times. Like not hyperbole, probably 1,000 times. And the 4 of us, loved it. And then we made the cardinal sin of playing online, and we actually learned like how deep the strategy went. And it was like once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Essentially, so it more or less ruined board gaming for us. But that said, this would still be my choice. I would come up with... I have not been able to find another deck building game on par with Dominion. So maybe we could talk afterwards if you have any options. So yeah, I don't have any like cute answer of personal finance or not, but I would love to build a deck building game that has the replayability of Dominion, but doesn't ruin board gaming for us forever.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you for coming to episode 500.